Hello and welcome back to Savage Garden, a podcast sampling Anne Rice's Immortal universe, one morsel at a time. I, as ever, am Kat and am joined by Naomi as we continue our struggle through series two, not because of the show's quality, but because of the show's content, because it's getting pretty sad.
It's
Uh,
getting to the sad stuff.
Yeah, and today we're going to be brave. We're going to put on our big girl pants and we are going to get through episode six, which is ranked fifth with 8.6 on
Mm.
IMDb. So we're going to get through episode six, like the light by which God made the world before he made light. So yes, it's just a very sad, very, very sad episode, isn't it, Naomi?
It's really sad. It's really sad. I am going to miss the wildly ostentatious titles when we move to the Vampire Lestat because while we haven't been given all the titles yet, they appear to be stops on his tour or other shorter
Yes.
shorter titles, which is entirely in keeping with the new approach to the series because obviously the Vampire Lestat is a very, very different book to Interview with the Vampire.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is like I have this book which has a lovely dragon on the front, which I think Lestat would like, which is what I keep my notes in. And we are almost, as Claudia would be proud of me, almost to the end. I'm not sure we're going to get through the trial in this scant few pages that are left because I have thoughts. I have many, many thoughts. But yeah, this is a really interesting, very clever, very quiet, very melancholy, very upsetting episode. Written by Hannah Muscovich and Shane as well, and also directed by Emma Freeman, who goes on to direct the trial episodes. She has a really long-standing relationship with Sam Reid. She is an Australian director, and I believe she directed all of the Newsreader. So they've worked together very closely for a long period of time, and I think that really comes out in the trial episode. And I think it really comes out here as well. There are some beautiful, particularly the setup with Armand and Madeline when we meet them later on in the episode. There are just some really beautiful tableaus in this episode. But we start off with an extremely pissed off Daniel, basically trying to mine real Rashid for information. He has worked out, not surprisingly, that real Rashid is a Talamasca agent, and they are back in the fancy sushi place. And we get the reappearance of Raglan James, who is a delight. We do enjoy him. Um, the sad thing about the Talamasca being cancelled is that he was the single best thing in it, apart from the wonderful William Finkner. And it was a real shame how they mishandled that because it categorically should have been an episode of the week.
Yeah, or just get on with its main story faster than it
Just
did,
get on with it.
because by the end of it, we were still we still knew nothing about
Oh,
Guy's
went
mother.
nowhere. It went nowhere. It went
So
absolutely nowhere.
it's kind of like it's a shame it's cancelled, but also it's not like we were like, oh my God, what's going to happen? We'll never know. It's because it was just like, oh yeah, some stuff happens. So I think there's enough in it that they can fold it into like Mayfair and like the Vampire Lestat should they wish to tie up some of the stuff. I guess the stuff to do with the Great Conversion, which is
mm,
kind of touched in Talamasca, will continue through in the Vampire Lestat. So it's not like any of the more interesting stuff will be lost forever, but it very much was not a oh my God, I can't believe they've cancelled this show. Like, all of those other shows that get wrongly cancelled after one season, I kind of get it with Talamasca.
yeah, because the difficulty with it was that the only compelling elements were Jasper and Raglan James. That was it.
Mm.
Because there just wasn't anything that interesting for the rest of it. And I can't see Jasper reappearing in um anything that Roland Jones does because I just don't see it, but I could see him popping up in Mayfair. I could see that being more of a thing that happens in between Daniel trying to mine the Telemasca people. We have Armand and Louis arguing like the world's most pretentious gay couple about what should go on the wall. There's a reference where when Armand makes a suggestion about some artwork to put on the wall, and I'm not going to pretend that I'm familiar enough with the artists that they are discussing to be able to tell you what they were mentioning there. But Louis makes this, like, which I assume is like in gay pretentious couple world, devastating crack about how it would look like a Firmdale lobby. And that had me cackling because I spend most of my life in London meeting people in Firmdale hotel lobbies on the grounds that they have the best bars and they're always empty. Whether you're in Brummers or Ham Yard, you can always have a very fine time hanging out in the bar of a Firmdale hotel lobby. So yes, that was very entertaining. And Daniel, by now, to be honest, a little bit belatedly, has realized that he is interviewing two highly vicious predators and possibly should be slightly more concerned for his welfare than he has been to date. Daniel, you have spent the past few days gleefully slagging off two vampires. Is it not a little bit late in the day now to be developing a sense of self-preservation?
Yeah, I do enjoy how, he is told by Raglan that, you fear Armand is the other
Mm,
one that you should be afraid of, which is
yeah,
ties into what, we've said repeatedly on this, is that Louis comes across as calm and civilized and stuff, but he is the feral, he is way more
yeah,
feral than any of the others. Like obviously there's a whole thing throughout the first season with, him being different to Claudia and Lestat, but he's not. He's always he's cosplaying human when he's more animal than either one of them. And yeah, I think, Daniel really does need to be a little, I mean, to be wary of both of them, and considering his newly recovered past with Armand, quite rightly to fear Armand. And I guess to this point, Louis not present. Louis hasn't done anything to make him feel uncomfortable.
well, President Louis has just sort of sat there with sad eyes. Um, been maybe a little bit weird when that whole bit where he scoffed like a whole ton of endangered animals in front of him. Did the
Yes.
little cosplay when he was pretending that Armand was Rashid, which I don't really know how they thought they were going to get away with the fact that obviously he just walked away and brushed that off as if it was nothing. But yeah, he's not done anything yet to make Daniel terrified of him. But Louis is the vampire you don't see coming because, like, Lestat is all flash and noise and a little bit sadistic because he enjoys playing with his kills, but not really. Claudia is kind of Lestat concentrated.
Mm.
So she is far more of a calculating, gleeful killer than Lestat was. And then you've got Louis in between, who, as you said, is very calm. But this man is going to go, as we will see, fucking scorched earth when he needs to. So yeah, he is terrifying. But yes, the Talamasca are they want the book published, we find out, and they want questions slipped in, which Raglan's like, let's not worry about that. Let's just get the book published. And I particularly enjoyed it when he just sat back and waited for Daniel to pay for the lunch. I thought that was greatly enjoyable. Show up, cause chaos, give Daniel no reassurances whatsoever, other than the fact that they will actually publish his book, because that's what he does get out of that. That's the one thing he gets out of that meeting. He gets no reassurances about his safety, but he does get a reassurance that his work will be published, which sadly for Daniel is probably enough.
Mm.
That's what he's about. And then back with our pretentious gays, bougie gays, they are waiting for Revelation to enter the room, which, of course, again, as these things always pay back, uh, pays back later on when Louis very forcibly shoves Armand through that wall. But we won't see that for a couple of episodes yet. But yeah, I just love how they set everything up to come back to be tied in later. And then we flash back to the 40s where we have Sam doing his Enduring for Guido play, which I actually do have a script for. I haven't read it. I have this script, which came with one of the auction lots. And then I am fascinated that they made multiple trial scripts. I do think that's really interesting because the trial script that is used is out there, but I have Santiago's trial script, which is completely different and has loads of I think there's one for sale in the auction at the moment. It has loads of like asides by Santiago, which shows how incredibly jealous he is of Louis and how much he disrespects Claudia. But I'm just fascinated that the production made multiple trial scripts. Just a really intriguing thing for them to have done. But we have basically Santiago taking, I guess, a more central role because Louis' approach in the past has been to, as he says, indulge the buffoon and smother him with praise. And Ben Daniels is so, so good in this scene. He's absolutely, completely magnetic. I also love that the entire sequence is a really theatrical joke on slagging off Waiting for Godot.
Mm.
And I just love how ridiculously theatrical and meta this is. Because as we've said before, quite a lot of the second series of Interview with the Vampire is just Louis and Claudia not understanding the dynamics of an Amdram group.
Yes.
Because I have been part of 3 Amdram groups and they were all messy as fuck and had some of the singularly worst human beings you could ever wish to meet who would have knifed each other for a small role in a play that would be seen by their family and friends and maybe some locals who had been physically dragged there. And yet they did not understand. Had they come in and understood that Santiago was the principal of this Amdram group and that they needed to treat him with a little bit more care, I feel that quite apart from all their, vampire stuff, I think their lives would have been rather easier. But in between, them doing this Enduring for Guido, we've got the entire coven now is against Louis and Claudia, every single one of them.
Mm.
So we have them all reading Claudia's diaries, which they've tucked into their scripts, which is such a horrific violation. They are going to Roger and they are like mind Santiago. It shows how powerful he is kind of mind controlling him through Estelle, who's in front of him, to get them to reveal that Lestat, he's not been in touch with Lestat since 1940. If I am not vindicated that Armand already has him at this point, I'm just going to say, Roland, missed opportunity. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. When I finally watch it, there's going to be like that moment in Brooklyn Nine-Nine where I'm going to be like, vindicated. I was correct. But at this point, we have to assume, if they're playing good and if they're playing nice, that maybe the coven don't know where Lestat is.
Yeah, I can see Armand just because of how jealous Armand is about Lestat. I can see a way where Armand immediately like went and snatched him up and has been keeping him somewhere. And then later on, when he realizes the Coven's plans, he can be like, "Oh, well, actually, guys, look who I have here." Um, so yeah, I think the Coven very much are in the dark at this point, but I think there is a strong chance that Armand, because you don't want, if your current partner is still clearly besotted with their ex. You don't
Yeah.
want to run the risk that ex is going to turn up. You want to make sure, and in a, we know how jealous and how weird. Oh,
Not in Armand's way of
yeah,
thinking. No.
yeah. For Armand, why wouldn't you like go and enslave and entrap your rival? Because because it's the only way he can keep on with Louis. Because if Lestat comes and there's a reconciliation, is Amon still going to be on the table? Probably not.
Fuck no, he's not going to be on the table. Armand was only look. Armand was the sort of this not even the starter romance. Armand was the romance that Louis needed to have in order to then go on and maybe find somebody else. He was the rebound guy because he'd been with Lestat for so long and it had been so hot and so heavy, and he's so distraught by his death and his part in his death, which he, and as we will go on to see, still very, very, very clearly resents Claudia for. And, he goes to Paris and there's a hot guy and he's sweet and he's like kind of romantic and he's sort of a little boy playing dress up, trying to be master. And Louis doesn't appreciate that he has, from day one, a master manipulator and predator next to him the whole time. The single biggest problem of Louis and Claudia, apart from their inability to recognize dram dynamics, is they never once takes Armand seriously as a threat. And they fucking should have. How they walked into that situation and never took Mr. fucking orange-eyed just because he's pretty doesn't mean he's not scary. And they don't take him seriously. They don't take him seriously throughout this episode as a threat. And, that is their undoing. And he's so clever. I mean, there is a shot in the trailer which has Lestat in a suit being dragged upside down, and there is a Tiffany lamp next to him. So that certainly can't be Magnus because that's way too early to have a Tiffany lamp. So it absolutely could be Armand, but then if they're going to take the approach of melding everything, it could also mean absolutely nothing. So until we've seen it, we won't know. But yeah, I mean, not taking, I think that's Armand's his biggest asset really is that people don't take him seriously as a threat because they see him and he's so baby faced and he's very polite and very gentlemanly. It's like he rarely raises his voice. He doesn't shout. He doesn't indulge in vulgarity. He's just sort of this seemingly polite little thing that you think you can throw over easily. I mean, he's so good when he's talking about, to Daniel. Doesn't buy a word of it, so I honestly don't know why he's bothering. It's like, oh no, the buffoon was in the audience. And you're like, yeah, right. I mean, the notion that the 500-year-old vampire who can read everybody's mind doesn't know that they're all out there plotting against him. Bullshit. Absolute fucking bullshit. He is so full of shit. It is extraordinary. But he's so good. Assad Zaman is so good that you believe him. I mean, Daniel's not buying a word of it. Louis at this point is like, I mean, as we said last episode, when Daniel's like, I've ruined 2 marriages. Nope, you've ruined 3. Because Louis is already over it. Because Amanda's like, oh, well, I didn't realize. And then, of course, they're just arguing like fury about, because Armand obviously is very concerned about Daniel being left unchaperoned at the restaurant. And then we get into Claudia's diaries and what we initially contemplated calling this podcast instead of Savage Garden, but we thought we might get in trouble. We wanted to call it Fuck These Vampires. But we thought we might have problems because people are grumpy. But it is the best name. Fuck These Vampires. And then we've got just Daniel again. He just gets he's got no sense of fucking self-preservation. Like mocking Rashid's martinis while reminding Armand by saying his were better of his play acting is submissive. Like, do you want to live or not? Do you want, I mean, like, why are we poking the little psychotic bear? And the interview has gone very south at this point. I did greatly enjoy Armand's sort of, well, belated apologies for trying to kill you. I liked it. There was absolutely no sincerity in it. Greatly enjoyed that. Um, so everything has gone very badly. And then go back to the 1940s. Madeline, somewhat unwisely, gets fed up with them painting swastikas on her window. And in what we can all agree is not really the smartest move, decides to put her own window in and allow them to enter and grab her.
Yeah, I mean, and even if they weren't going to come in and grab her, she's got to pay for that window. Like,
She's got to pay for that window in the 1940s with what? What was she going to pay with that one? Girl, you are ostracized in a community that loathes you. We're not truly clear what Madeline has done at this point, but we assume that we see that she's been in love with, either not in love with or slept with a German, which, yes,
yeah,
in that time was enough for you to be ostracized, quite understandably. And they did, as we see, drag the women into the square and shave their heads, and worse. But yeah, girl, if you're not making any money from your dressmaking because no one's buying from you because they think you're a Nazi sympathizer, why are we putting our own windows out, Madeline? These things cost. You need to take more of Louis' capitalist approach to these things. But enter the heroine of the hour, enter Claudia, who very efficiently takes care of all of the people who had come to kill and rape Madeline. I really liked that when she was talking to Madeline afterwards, she didn't wipe her mouth of the blood. Because, of course, that was the first thing that Lestat did after he killed the priests. He's like, oh no, I'm scaring Louis. The first thing he does is he wipes his mouth off, wipes his mouth of the blood before he talks to him. But Claudia is so much more confident in herself that she won't be rejected, that she doesn't feel the need to do that. And I sort of just loved that little moment, that she was so strong and confident that, yeah, I'm a vampire. I'm not going to hurt you. And you know what? I think you're strong enough to see me covered in blood and it not be a problem.
yeah. I also like how, in a way, in her saving Madeline, she's saving her past self. Like
Mm.
she's coming and doing what she would have clearly have wished that somebody did for her when she was with Bruce.
Yeah.
And so nothing progresses far enough with Madeline. It's clear where it's going, but Claudia comes in and sort of saves that, and we have to admire women saving women, because I think even
Mm.
well, because I think it's sort of mentioned later on that it's not romantic yet.
Yeah.
So this isn't like, oh my God, the woman I absolutely love, I need to save her, I need to save her honor. This is just like a woman saving another woman from being brutalized in a way that she was.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, she's obviously fascinated by Madeline, but up until this point, they've not done anything apart from talk in a slightly snippety way to each other. It's just she saw that she was in danger and she chose to step in and save her. And that is really, really beautiful. We now flick back to the Theatre of the Vampire, where everyone is now side-eyeing the living fuck out of Louis, which again, I just want to go back to Louis's inability to cope with group dynamics. Louis, how are you not noticing that every single person in this theatre is now side-eyeing the fuck out of you. How are you not feeling the animosity? He can read their minds. I mean, I appreciate that Lestat was a horrific teacher and educator because he was always so scared of either of them developing their skills, their abilities, because it would mean that they left him. So he repeated the abuse that Gabrielle, I'm not really on board with Gabriella. It just seems bizarre to me that we're changing the name. Sorry, Roland, love you. But yeah, so I appreciate that Louis hasn't had a huge ton of opportunity, but he has now been in Paris for a few years.
Mm.
So he's now I mean, he doesn't like the theatre, he doesn't care for the theatre, but again, I think like in New Orleans, Louis was determined to be was determined to be separate from everything and separate from his vampire life, and that worked out horrendously for everybody. And it's sort of the same thing here. He can't be with Armand, but simultaneously reject everything that Armand is, and there not be significant tension there. And again, I just wish that he'd been able to, settle in Paris for a few months, have a fun summer fling with Armand, and then, I don't know, go somewhere else, find himself some more beautiful boyfriends, have himself a wonderful, wonderful time, instead of unfortunately going from the frying pan into the fire, from one domestic violence situation to someone who is a million times worse, just not overtly. Because everything that Armand does is so much more insidious. And we are not, dismissing or diminishing in any way, shape, or form what Lestat does to Louis. I mean, the trailers seem to flash back to the fight, and I'm honestly not sure we've got enough in us for a third go around of the fight.
No.
Like it's been done. It's been done. Like Louis was going to leave him in a heartbeat because Claudia came back. Lestat acted as men act when their partners choose to leave them, which is the single most dangerous time, and promptly did what he did. And there is no excuse for it. And he apologizes profusely, but apologies can only ever get you so far, can't they? So, but Armand manipulates for years, sort of fails upwards, but we'll see. I still need to know. I need to know what the deal was between Armand and Lestat, because there's obviously a deal. There's no way there wasn't a deal, but all of that to come. But we've got Louis and his baby art dealer, baby capitalist king era. And like the dom sub stuff between them is really hot, but it just always feels performative. I do wish that we had, I don't know, I wish that we had seen more of an actual their sex scenes, their lives together, because what we actually see is quite sterile. Yeah. Obviously everything in Dubai is very expressly designed to look like a prison, with the bedroom walls that are bars. You've got the windows, which is a terrible idea. I'd never fucking live there in a million years if I was Louis. That Armand will be safe from. If they fail, Louis will not. Louis will die instantly. Well, I mean, maybe it's just the sign of how suicidal he is. But it is rare to see a pairing between a black actor and a South Asian actor, particularly male actors, on the screen. Would have been nice to have seen them. I mean, I appreciate it's very because their relationship is really private, and that's kind of the vibe that they give, but it would have been nice to have seen them together on screen, I think, so that we had more of a feel for who they were in their private times. Because you get stuff like, Louis ordering him face down in the coffin, which is all very hot and all, but there's nothing to kind of cling on to, because they have sweet chemistry, but not necessarily hot and sexy chemistry in the way that Jacob Anderson and Sam Reid have. Because you can't have that with everybody. That would be insane. I mean, I appreciate that Jacob Anderson is hot as fuck, but it's not going to translate to every single human being he meets. So, yeah, I do feel there was a tiny bit of a missed opportunity there. I would have liked to have seen a tiny bit more of a glimpse behind the veil to understand, why this really relationship endured and what they were like in their kind of private moments. Because mostly we just get the bitchy gay stuff, which is funny.
Yeah.
They act like the world's most upper middle class, probably got a child called Tarquin, spend all their time arguing about having to pay private school fees. And Claudia, meanwhile, is just fucking handing Madeline her diaries, which is both absolutely beautiful and also, Claudia, you know the rules now.
Yeah.
You know the rules, girl, and you're just handing the diaries to a human being. And of course, the Madeline Claudia relationship, it is a tricky relationship that isn't perhaps touched on as much because Delaney doesn't look young. And she doesn't.
Yeah.
But how old is Claudia meant to be? 12? 13?
Yeah, I think like 12, 13. Yeah, she's definitely sort of like early teens.
Yeah. And I mean, Madeline is a grown ass woman. So, and I appreciate she's not. She's a, 40, 50-year-old at this point? She's got to be, I would imagine. Claudia at this point in the narrative is probably my age. And like, if Claudia is anything like me, she is fucking over everything at this point. She is over all of humanity. She is over living with anyone. She doesn't want men breathing near her. I imagine the mere sound of Louis's breath at this point, as undead breath, probably driving her to insanity. So yeah, at this point, Claudia is like, you know what? I want a life that's just for me. And I get you, girl. I get you. But we do slightly in this adaptation just gloss over the fact that Madeline is now being problematic as fuck by hooking up with the 12-year-old. And I mean, I suppose it's like, what do you see? Do you see the outside or do you see the inside? What matters, the wine or the bottle? And obviously, in this case, it's the wine. She sees Claudia's soul. She sees her for the woman that she is, not the child that she appears. But that is, and I mean, I've seen some fairly horrific colorism online in relation to Bailey Bass and Delaney Hales and very unkind things about Delaney. But the Bailey did look younger. And I think if Bailey had continued in the character, I think it would have been a very different scenario, this relationship, because she would have looked so much younger than Roxanne Duran, who is astonishing, by the way. We should give her all her plaudits. I think she's fantastic in this episode. And she has this real, because she has the incredibly pale skin and the red hair, there's this incredible ethereal, particularly with all the themes of art. She looks like something pre-Raphaelite. It just fits in so beautifully to the kind of the Gothic aesthetic. And then we have Louis coming home, and he is so aggressive. I wanted to be like, what the fuck, dude? Claudia brings a girl home for the first time, and this is how we're acting? But
Yeah.
they're just done with each other, aren't they? And that's the truth. You can love somebody, but you don't necessarily want to live with them.
No, and it's a very interesting meet the parents scenario, isn't it?
Yes.
And it's Claudia is done. She's no secrets whatsoever from Madeline, and we get all of this conversation about I've been a third all my life, you know.
Mm.
I just want something that's for me. And she's basically sort of saying like, aren't you sick of me? Because I am very much sick of you. And like, let me have her and we'll just go. And then we can be free of one another. We can finally kind of live our own lives separated.
And I mean, she's very good in this scene. I do like the movie version of this because it is basically a manipulative tantrum by a toddler. And I like their adaptation. I love that. I love that because it works in there. I love this adaptation where it's like, hey, I've got one thing and it's some weird white lady. Can you just get on board? But yeah, Louis' aggression, because there is still so much incredible pent up resentment towards Claudia about Lestat because he killed Lestat to keep her safe. And I do think that he had to. I don't think there was any other choice at that point, even if she was, and she absolutely was manipulating him to that end. The stat still wasn't going to let them go because he was so terrified, and Claudia needed to live her life. Um, so what was done needed to be done, but that doesn't mean that Louis is okay with it. He's absolutely categorically not okay with it, and you get this aggression of him screaming at her, I just want a couple of months where you don't fuck up. And it's like, how is that fair at this point? Like, you chose to go along with the Mardi Gras, you chose to make the decision. Obviously, in this adaptation, it is Louis that kills Lestat. He makes that conscious decision to do it. In every other version, it is Claudia that does it. You're the one that followed her around. She kept you alive when you were suffering from clinical depression and wandering around, war-torn Europe. She's the one that has kind of tried to warn you consistently about Armand, but because you don't see him as a threat, you've not paid the slightest bit of fucking attention. How is it fair to be saying to Claudia, I want a couple of months where you don't fuck up? It's just so unkind to her in that moment. But yeah, as we said, they're done because Louis at this point is, I don't know, 100 years old, I guess.
Mm.
Louis has been around, or are they that old? No, maybe not that old. But either way, Louis is, no, he's not that old, but he is,
Well, he was already like
he was with
30
the
in his
thing, yeah.
30 when he
So
was
he was,
human. So
yeah, so he was with Lestat for like 30 years, wasn't he? So he would already have been like in his 60s by the time they left New Orleans. Then they roamed for years. So there is a timeline somewhere. Some absolute goddess has put it together. But Louis is probably in his 70s at this point. And again, if you're in your 70s, you just want a nice life. You just want to like be cozy and be in your garden. And well, for me, I fully intend to be drinking and doing a phenomenal amount of drugs in my 70s. I don't see the point in not. Like if I'm going to go out, I may as well go out high. But they've been together too long. Can you imagine living in a one-bedroom apartment in 1940s Paris? They're just done with each other. And they love each other deeply, but they need that little moment of separation. Um, and so then they decide that they're going to ask Armand to turn Madeline. And again, I'm just like, guys, why did you think that was a good idea? I suppose they didn't understand at that point that the fledgling gets the maker's powers. Because I don't know if that's really been discussed. No, it is. It's in the rules. But I don't know, Claudia. I mean, they've not really paid attention to the rules, have they? Because Daniel is going to be like an insanely powerful fledgling because he's Armand's only person that Armand has ever made.
yeah, because Armand is a virgin when it comes to making other vampires.
Yeah, it's because Armand doesn't want to give his power away. Uh, And I hate in this sequence that Louis tries to manipulate him by saying, can you imagine what I would be without the burden of her? And you just hear the nail being driven into the coffin in the back. I mean, even if he wasn't already planning, which I think he was, I suppose the question is always the question for me all the way along has been at what point did he decide to kill Louis? Because he was always killing Claudia. She's an abomination as far as he's concerned because he believes in the roles. But at what point did he decide to kill Louis? And I would love them to answer that. For me, it's probably when Louis says he's not his companion in front of Santiago. But I imagine there were maybe some more grace notes, and I think we get to the second point later on in the episode. But if he didn't already have the trial in mind, and I'm fairly sure he did, that just nailed it for him because he's like, actually, you would be quite cool without her. But obviously, that requires Louis to live, which was not the intent of the trial. Then we have Claudia being very sort of gracious and polite, very well reasoned her arguments as to why Armand should turn Madeline. And so, of course, he just screams at her, calls her Claudia de Liancourt, and says she's a master manipulator, which is accurate.
Yeah.
She is a master manipulator, which is what I love about her. Anyone who gets upset about her lying in the diaries, being a manipulator, like, a girl is a magnificent vampire. She is a glorious, manipulative little cunty angel. We love her. Let us appreciate her in all of her glory, which includes manipulating the fuck out of every useless man that she is presented with, which includes her daddies. You know?
Yeah. And like, let's face it, I mean, even now, women still don't particularly have any power. And,
No,
for centuries, the ability to manipulate men was the only thing that we kind of really had for ourselves because, we weren't allowed to vote. We weren't allowed,
no.
to be educated and stuff. So the only way that women have survived for as long as they have is through learning to, manipulate the will of men. I mean, it's like, hey, look through Shakespeare, Lady Macbeth, she wanted a castle. She wanted a
She
castle.
wanted a castle and she wanted a castle and she wanted her husband to stop being such a fucking pussy and just kill the old guy so that she could have a little bit of power for once. She just wanted some nice parties. She
Yeah.
obviously wanted a baby as well, but we'll get into that another time. But yeah, she just wanted to be, I mean, that was for years, all women could do was marry the least rapey guy
Yeah.
and hope that he only wanted to have sex once or twice a year. That was pretty much it. You married the least rapey guy, ideally gave him a son, because as soon as he had a son, he'd be much
It
more
was, yeah.
likely to leave you alone. Hopefully, get him to hook up with a mistress that he could sleep with, but not decide that he will leave for her because obviously at that point you've got to kill the mistress. You've got no other option there. So you kind of want like a slutty mistress, but not one that's like ideally below his station, so that he
Yes.
couldn't be with her. And then just swan around with your wealth and hope that none of his friends tried to rape you, and you only had to have sex a couple of times a year, ideally for about a minute, and hope you didn't get any particularly unpleasant venereal disease. That was our lot for years, ladies. We cannot be grumpy at Claudia using her feminine vampire wiles to make the best of a miserable situation. Because, like, they never tried to save this girl's life. They dragged this woman. Yes, she was horribly burned. Yes, Louis felt guilty about it. Yes, she probably would have died, but she didn't know that.
Yeah.
Could have just left her. You just dragged her away and went, here's a pretty dolly that's going to save our marriage, which it did for a very short period of time until the dolly suddenly started expressing thoughts, feelings, and desires for independence. Then the dolly wasn't fun anymore. So, yes, all hail to my goddess, Claudia. Asad's man looks hot as fuck in this entire sequence, by the way. He looks the most slinky and the most French, I think he looks, in the entire season in this. And we have Madeline absolutely giving it back to him. Zero fucks. Again, is this wise? No. Why are we all wandering around acting like there is not a spectacular predator in our midst? This is the problem, see? They look at Armand and they're like, oh, little murder mittens kitten. No, he's a fucking panther. He will rip your head
Yes,
off.
but you say this, but that is exactly you whenever we go to a cat cafe. You will specifically go and befriend the one that you are giving strict warnings to not touch. And then you'll be like, oh, it scratched me. And it's like, yes, because they told us it would. So
I just can't help it. I like the grumpy ones best. The ones with murder in their eyes. I'm like, oh, you shall be my friend forever.
yeah, that's just what Madeline's thinking with Armand, you know. She's going, oh well, you know.
The apple spoon thing was weird.
Yes, I have a note about eating it. Who eats an apple with a spoon? Is that something that the French used to do and it's lost its way? Like, how?
Tragically, because my brain knows these things, I believe this has come from Roland Jones and his nanny, that his nanny does this.
Like, I mean, it must have been just to
Who?
hollow out that first hole is, you know, depending on like the type of apple and the skin on it and the strength of your spoon. Like, I mean, I guess it's one way. I guess food was, you know, scarce still after the war, and I guess it's one way to make your meal last. But yeah, it was borderline psychotic that she was eating this, hollowing out this apple with the teaspoon. No.
So crazy. And I get that she was putting on a front because she wants to show that she is strong enough for these vampires, but also, like, there is a level of disrespect being shown to Armand in this scene that is just so unwise. So unwise. Because they just see him as cute little murder mittens, you know, rather than the feral vampire that he is. He is so weirdly convinced, though, that Claudia is going to kill herself. And I don't think Claudia would.
Yeah, because he says during the conversation, why do you want to be a vampire when she's just good? And what do you do when she,
Throws
walks into
herself
the
in the
fire?
fire.
Because she's got, that is something she's going to do. Yeah.
But I'm not convinced by that. I mean, his only real, I mean, okay, so Magnus does it, and then that plays out again with Nikki. But Nikki is clinically depressed and obviously, severely chemically unbalanced before he becomes a vampire. So becoming a vampire solves nothing for him, it just makes it worse. Like, if you were suffering that significantly with mental health issues before, becoming a vampire just means you've now got mental health issues for eternity.
Yeah.
That's not going to help anything. So I'm not sure why he was so convinced. I think he just wanted to convince himself that somebody that he perceives as frail cannot have gone on. But I think Claudia would have very comfortably settled with Madeline and been thriving in the modern world. I think they'd have been fine together. And then we cut back to the present where obviously we've got Daniel going, oh, so mater in the bedroom, mater only when it's hot or convenient. Yes. I'm just like, yes, Louis. Again, how did we not understand the dynamic of this relationship? This is a performative dom sub thing you have going on. There is no transfer of power. Obviously the sub can always say stop, and that's where the power lies, but he was only ever performing this. This is just a role that he performs and has performed since he was a child, because it gives everyone else the semblance of control. And then when he became hugely powerful himself, he continues to kind of switch between these roles depending on the situation. to manipulate the outcome that he wants. But it doesn't mean that he's ever not in control. But yes, we go back to the theater, and Armand and Santiago Sam are basically slagging off Waiting for Godot, which is very amusing. And you've got Sam being the, great diplomat in the background. And Armand refuses to turn Madeline, as he was always going to. Whether that is probably because he doesn't want to pass on his power, but also because he doesn't want a fledgling. And then, of course, as soon as Louis makes her, he can't have her because she is basically somebody else in Lestat's line. And I am going to be interested to see how the adaptations cope with the fact that in the books, Lestat was basically having kids left, right, and center and then forgetting they existed. Like, he turned 1,000,000,001 different people and then never gave a fuck about any of them but Louis. And David, I suppose, but I just can't see there's a need for David when you've got Daniel. I just don't see the point. Why would you need him? Daniel is there. But he was never going to allow Madeline to live. And then we have the turning scene, which is beautiful. It is beautifully, beautifully directed. Madeline seeing Claudia in the light when she's never seen her in the daytime. It's just such a beautiful declaration of love, that this is how she sees her. This is how, and I mean, again, like, theirs has been a very short romance, I suppose, because as we said, it's not really romantic, but that's how, when she looks at Claudia, that's how she sees her. And then we have that beautiful, beautiful declaration, because Claudia is so determined that she not get Lestat's blood. And she says, don't worry about the blood, it's the blood that made you. Such a beautiful line. And we have this beautiful turning, which immediately becomes quite ugly when we see Louis left alone, clinically depressed, in a blood-soaked room with his wrist sliced open. Like, Louis, honey, you're not a well soul. And he's very uncomfortable at being able to feel Madeline, because he turned her, but he's not turned her out of love. He was turned out of love. Claudia was turned kind of out of, Claudia was turned out of love, but a manipulative love. And Madeline was turned out of obligation. So it's a very different thing. And then we have Armand in Louise. Armand with a suitcase is never not going to be funny to me. I'm sorry. It is. I mean, I literally laughed out loud when I saw it. The notion that the coven has ousted him, that they have spent all of this time going to Roger, stealing the powerful light so they can direct the sun, stealing all the projections, causing chaos. And Armand is just absolutely oblivious to all of this.
Yeah.
Because he loves Louis so much that he misses the entire coven going behind his back, and then they are able to oust him. I mean, they'd be dead in 5 minutes. They'd be dead in seconds. It's a very funny scene in a really unpleasant way. And Asad Zaman plays it so perfectly. And Daniel is still not buying a single fucking word of it in the presence. And, Armando's very good. Like, saying, I'm a coward, why should I show you my shame? Talking about the pages from the diary that have been excised. And then we get, and I was wondering when we would get it, the deeply unpleasant, you asked me for this, when Armand tells Louis that he erased his memory because Louis asked him to.
Yeah.
Because every abuser at some point says, you asked for this, you made me do it, don't you know what you do to me? I wouldn't have done this if it wasn't for you. You've provoked me, blah, blah, blah. So now we've got, you asked me for this, you asked me to erase your memories. I preserve your peace in this prison of empathy. And it's horribly unpleasant. Daniel doesn't buy it. And Louis clearly wants to believe it. And that in itself is upsetting. Because I think Louis at this stage is still, he knows it's bullshit and he knows it's all cracking. He knows it's all cracking. And that's why he hired Daniel, without question. He hired Daniel to come and talk to him because he knew something was wrong and he couldn't quite get there himself. But he's still at this point desperately trying to cling to the status quo and not blow his entire life up, which is happening whether he wants it or not. And then we flash to the restaurant, and as soon as you see Claudia in the yellow dress, it's just an absolute gut punch. It's so, so, so upsetting because she got such little time with Madeline. I mean, we're not given a timeline, but I assume that they've spent very little time together and have come back to effectively say goodbye to Louis, which is again, I'm just like, Armand, they were gone. If you had just let this play out, Claudia and Madeline would have been gone. You could have had Louis. You could have killed the entire coven and started again in absolute control.
Yeah. But I guess there's always that chance that she would come back and he wants Louis to himself.
She would come back, and of course, Blondie will come back. Well, he won't because he's in a dungeon. But yeah, it's one more of Lestat's bloodline out in the world. And yeah, you're right. I just don't think he could run the risk of Claudia coming back and Louis feeling comfortable and safe enough in her presence to be like, you know what? Maybe this isn't my forever relationship. Maybe it's time to move on.
They go off, they wander, they wander around like they said, and they find, another group of vampires that, are a lot more fun than the French vampires. And she's coming back and she's like, you know what, Louis, just come out for a bit. Just come and, just come and see us. And then, he gets his head turned and again it's bye bye Armand.
Yeah, because I kind of feel like, there have got to be some cool covens somewhere. We've not really seen them yet, but there've got to be some chill covens that would have had a nice time and would have welcomed Louis. So yeah, he just couldn't risk it. And then we have Madeline talking about what she can feel through Louis and saying, I can feel your love for him. And I think this is probably, even to the extent if he didn't already have it in his mind, which I think he probably did, this is where Louis dies. Because that's not Armand you're feeling, sweetheart. And that's the thing, because I mean, no one knows this. Because he read Louis and Claudia the second they walked in, the second they saw Lestat's portrait. So he knows, but having a fledgling say that she can sort of verbalize that she can still feel how much Louis loves Lestat. I mean, the humiliation of that must have been horrific. And so he just stands there quite calmly by the door as Santiago approaches, and very well done too, to make Santiago the villain of the piece. Oh, Armand, you are very, very good. Very good indeed. You just stand there, all helpless, like a little damsel in distress. I mean, in the next episode, we have Sam guarding him. Sam. I could take Sam. I'm not even a vampire. So yeah. And I love that they stage this sequence with no sound. It makes it so much worse. But again, it all goes down to they just, they were frogs in a pot that they didn't realize was boiling.
Yeah, because it's not just because it's not even like it's Santiago that goes in and ranks them
No,
up. There's already people, there's already
they were
plants in
already
there
there. They were
waiting for
already
the
in there,
signal.
and they didn't notice. That is how lax they had both gotten with their own safety and security. Because Lestat would have noticed them. Absolutely, Lestat would have noticed them. But Louis is, in his mind, like, Louis is unburdened because he feels that Claudia is going to go off and live her life and be happy now, which is all he wanted. And he has the false sense of security of Armand, which is a terrible false sense of security. And he just doesn't see, I mean, how he doesn't see that all the coven members are in the room is beyond me. But he doesn't until they suddenly appear. And then, yeah, they're all dragged out. And then we get the trial sequence. And I do get incredibly grumpy. And I know I shouldn't, I'm normally more diplomatic, but I do get grumpy with people that think that Lestat was at the trial willingly when his introduction is smoke and mirrors. I'm sorry. Do we need something to on screen to be more explicit? We see him in front of a mirror and we see him smoking. Smoke and mirrors. This is not a subtle show. This has never been a subtle show. They are saying very loudly, "Hello, guys. Maybe pay attention here." But yeah, this is the first time we see actual Lestat. This is our first actual Lestat moment because we've only had Dreamstat so far in this series. We've not had because Lestat obviously has been rotting in a box in New Orleans and at some point via Armand has made his way to 1940s Paris and is now being called upon to give witness at the trial. And we see him in that beautiful black pinstripe suit. They always seem to dress him the best at the most horrific moments of his life. And he is beautifully, beautifully dressed, smoking in front of a mirror. And he's told it's 10 minutes to his entrance. And that is where we leave it. Until next episode, which is the trial, which I will not be able to cope with because it upsets me too much.
Yeah, I mean it's a great ending for an episode because it could have ended with them being captured and I'm on by the door. But it does enough because obviously this transmitted weekly, so it
Yeah,
does enough to make sure that you come back. Not just obviously the final reveal that Lestat is there is the big like oh my god what, but even just before that when you have Santiago introducing that this is the first ever matinee
yeah.
performance of the
Oh,
Theatre
yes,
of the
of course.
Vampire.
Yes.
It's like, what? We're doing a matinee. That's brilliant. It's like, for so long we've used our show to tell you who you are as humans, but now we are gonna, unveil who we are to you, and you are all here as the jury, and it just sets up the next two episodes so well of going, okay. So like shit's gonna go down. And then we go to the basement and get the, Mr. DeLeoncourt, it's nearly time for your entrance. And then it's like that double header of like, what the fuck? And now I've got to wait 7 days. Like what? No,
I know
no.
they are. I mean, the reveals of them when they drag off their bags, and you've got a very dazed Madeline because they can't run the risk because the only person the stat can speak through on that entire trio is Madeline because he can't contact Louis, he can't contact Claudia. So we've got her dazed, and we've got the two of them. And yeah, just the sight of a bloody Claudia in the yellow dress is heartbreaking beyond belief. And then, yeah, we go down to him. We're like, wait, what? The stat's alive. He's there. He's in Paris. What's going on? And that, dear listeners, is where we leave you.
We'll be back next time as we look at season 2, episode 7. I could not prevent it. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course you couldn't. Of course you couldn't, sweetie. I believe you.
yeah,
I
just
believe you, murder mittens.
Yeah, just to travel, briefly back in time to the 90s, I feel it should be, I could but not prevent it. Yeah, right. You know,
Yeah.
it's but yeah, we will be back as we hurtle through these last couple of episodes, ready for our coverage of the vampire Lestat. Thank you as always for being with us. We really need you to be with us for the next two episodes because these are going to
We
be
do. My God, we need you to be with us. We're going to need you to be there with us spiritually as we cope. We're not going to be able to cope with the reunion scene. We're certainly going to be able to cope with the trial scene. So be
yeah,
strong with us.
but we're gonna need some wellness checks once those episodes go out because it's going to be a lot. But until then, please do, give us a like, rating, and follow wherever you're hearing us from, and do get in touch with us on social media. We've got the email. It's there should anybody wish to reach out to us. And yeah, we will be back in the very near future with part one of the trial.